Hi, I'm Jane from Poppy Patchwork, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make a 9-inch key lime pie quilt block. You can use this quilt block to make a quilt, and here are 3 different options. The first one is the quilt block repeated. The second one is the same quilt block but with sashings and cornerstones. And the third option is the quilt block placed on point. I've drawn it out in my quilt block notebook so that I know for the sizes of the pieces that I need to cut. And so you're going to need for this block in background fabric 8 2-inch squares and 1 4 3/4 inch square. In fabric A you're going to need 8 2-inch squares. In fabric B, you're going to need 2 4 3/4 inch squares. In fabric C, you're going to need 1 4 3/4 inch square. And in fabric D, you're going to need 1 3.5 inch square. So this block is made up of 4 patches in the corner, 1 centre piece and 4 identical split squares. We're going to start by making the 4 patches in the corner with the small 2-inch square pieces. So for these we're just going to pair them up right sides together. We're going to sew those together with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to set these seams and then press towards the darker fabric. And now I'm going to pin and sew these into 4 patches. So lining them up with opposite fabrics in the corners. Because I've pressed them in towards the dark fabric, these seams should nest together. I'm going to go back over to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm going to press these seams open for a flatter finish. So I'm going to set them and press them open. So I'm going to set those to one side. Making the identical split squares. For these we're going to be using the 4 4¾ inch squares. We're going to put the pieces in the same fabric to one side. Now on the back of the lighter fabric, using a quilter's quarter, we're going to mark 2 lines. So we're going to line the quilter's quarter along the diagonal of this square, and then we're going to draw a line on each side of the quilter's quarter. So now you should have 2 lines. Mine are a bit messy, but you've got 2 lines now. And then we're going to rotate it round and draw 2 lines on the other diagonal. So now you've got 4 lines drawn on the wrong side of one of your pieces. We're going to place that right sides together with the other fabric and pin it in place. So when I take it to the sewing machine, I'm going to stitch down this line until I get halfway. Then I'm going to come across and then stitch down this line. Then I'm going to rotate the piece around. Then I'm going to stitch down this line till I get to halfway, come across and then stitch down this line. I'm going to remove the pins. So I'm going to cut across the diagonal in both directions, and you may find it easier to have a rotating cutting board to do this, or a small mat that you can turn around. And now I'm going to press those seams. So I'm going to set the seams, and then I'm going to press them towards the darker fabric. And now we're going to use the other 4 3/4 inch pieces that are in the same fabric. I'm going to lay them on top of each other, and now I'm going to cut them across the diagonal. You need to be careful now because all the edges have the bias exposed, which is quite stretchy. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to take our sewn piece and match it right sides together with the piece that we've just cut, which is a little bit bigger, and that's fine. We're going to lay it on top and pop a couple of pins into it. So we're pinning along the long edge. So I'm going to take those to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to set the seams and press them towards the larger triangle. So to trim these using a standard ruler, you lay the ruler on top of the piece with the 45-degree line on this stitch line here, and where it intersects here you need the ruler to be at 1.75 or 1 3/4 inches, and that's the center. And then I'm going to trim up one side and along the top. I'm now going to rotate the piece around, and I'm going to line the 45-degree along that stitch line, line the bottom and left sides at 3.5, and that intersection point should be at 1.75, and then trim up and along the top. Now I like to use my Quilt in a Day triangle square up ruler to do my trimming. So with this, the piece remains folded, and I line the 3.5 inch line on the ruler on the stitch line, and then the piece here, the vertical piece, the vertical line goes on your other stitch line, and then I can trim up one side and down the other. So I'm going to do that with the rest of them. So I'm going to press these again and remove the dog ears. So I've returned all the pieces to the block layout, and now I'm going to pin the top two together. So I'm going to take those to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I've returned these to block layout. Now I'm going to pin the bottom squares to the columns. So I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch. So I've returned them to the block layout, and I'm going to press these two seams in towards this piece and these two seams out towards the 4 patches. So now the seams have been pressed in opposite directions. They should nest together when pinned. So I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and sew with the 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to set that seam and then I'm going to press it open. And now I'm going to pin and sew the last piece. So I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to set the seam and press it open.